Alright, so for this week's project, I will be making scrambled eggs using Great Value grade A eggs. They're about 5 days old, or at least I bought them 5 days ago, but they're just regular white eggs, and I believe they are still pretty cold right now, so I'm going to let them sit out and test a bunch of different things with them. Alright, so today I will be doing 4 different tests. I have my 4 eggs here. For the first one, I'm going to test the temperature between 2 eggs. So I'm going to actually have one that is room temperature and one that is still pretty cold. So they're all still pretty cold right now. I'm going to start with the cold one, and while I'm doing that, hopefully these can reach a room temperature. For the last 2, I will be testing the addition of salt and milk for the other 2, both at room temperature. Alright, so as you can see, my chilled egg actually is a little bit old. The yolk did crack when I broke it open, but I don't think that should change much. Okay, so I'm going to temp this before I scramble my eggs. It looks like it's about 57 to 58 degrees Fahrenheit at the moment. So I'm just going to use a fork, and I like mine a little bit fluffier, so I don't like to whisk it too much, but I just want to mix everything together. So for each 4 of the eggs, I will be keeping the temperature the same using an electric stovetop. So I wanted to take the temperature of my pan, and since I have an older stove top, it doesn't actually tell me the exact temperature. So I put a little bit of water in it, and I'm going to use my thermometer to test and see where it will be at throughout this whole process. I would like to keep the temperature the same for each egg, so I can really just tell the different additives and how they change the composition. 250 is usually an optimal temperature for frying eggs. We don't want to fry it, so this was around 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Alright, so the temperature of my scrambled eggs going into it is about 58 degrees, 60 degrees closer to. And my pan is hot, so I'm going to put it directly onto it. A key aspect of making scrambled eggs is actually starting with a hot pan. So you don't want to directly pour your scrambled eggs onto a cold pan and let it heat up. I kept it at the same temperature as before, so 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So here is what my chilled looks like. It is about 100 degrees, and it's cooling down really fast actually, so getting this temperature is quite difficult. So this should be my room temperature control, and I'm hoping all 3 of these will be around the same temperature. It's at about 80 degrees. As you can see, the egg is sticking to the pan a little bit more, so this is a non-stick pan. This is because the proteins are reacting with the heat and coagulating. For this experiment, I will be adding 1 tablespoon of milk. What should happen during this is that the milk should dilute the proteins, which then will tenderize as it cooks, creating a little bit more air pockets and a little bit more bubbles. So I cooked each 4 of the eggs at the same temperature, and when I added the egg mixture with the milk, it started to burn. As you can see, it's a little brown. So this egg actually cooked extremely fast. I think if I turned down the heat just a little bit, it wouldn't have browned as much. So this last type of egg, I actually added 1/4 teaspoon of salt. What will happen is that the salt will actually interfere with the different coagulations between the proteins. As we learned that the negative R groups will actually no longer repel each other, so they will come together easier. And this should be done at a lower temperature, but since I'm going to keep all the variables the same, I won't be changing the temperature for this. So with the addition of the salt, it actually increased the speed of coagulation, which means that the proteins came together faster, ultimately decreasing the cook time. All right, so these are my 3 separate room temperature egg styles. We've got the original, just regular room temperature around 78 degrees when I first started. We've got the addition of some 100% milk, and then the addition of 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And they were all cooked for about 1 minute and 10 seconds. All right, so I'm gonna do a little bit of a taste test, and I eat eggs almost every day. So I scramble a lot of eggs, and I really like to add spices into it, but this time I wanted to keep the flavor the same throughout. So instead of changing the different flavors, I wanted to change the composition of everything. So the original ones were pretty good, light and fluffy. Like I said, I don't like to mix it too much because I like to have that separation between the yolk and the white. I just think it tastes better that way. Overall, pretty good. And then I'm gonna try the room temperature and try to see if there's a difference between the two, because honestly, I always make eggs with just straight from the refrigerator. So there's a little bit more moisture in it. So like I said, I cooked all of them for about 1 minute and 10 seconds. So I like them a little bit wet at the end, just not too dry. And I think the biggest difference between the room temperature and the chilled one is the water activity, or the moisture, at least for me. Flavor doesn't really change that much. It might be a little bit more fluffy. I don't know, they both taste pretty good. So now I'm gonna try my milk, added milk. And you can see it's a little brown, which I think is kind of cool, because I did cook all of them at the same temperature, all for the same time, and this one cooked extremely fast. So I think if I turned down the temperature for this one, it wouldn't have browned as much, but there's definitely a texture change. You can taste that there's a lot more air bubbles in it, so it's really light and fluffy, and I actually do like that texture. The flavor also did change a little bit. I think that's from the browning, so I don't believe that the browning really came from the addition of milk, or the change in flavor came from the addition of milk. But overall, it tastes pretty good. Now I'm gonna go into the salt. So this one was a room temperature egg, and I added 1/4 tablespoon of salt and cooked it at the same temperature as the other 3 for about 1 minute and 10 seconds. Oh my goodness. Wow. So I know that a teaspoon of salt is way too much for one egg. So that is not pleasant to eat at all. But you can tell that the density is a little bit thicker. It also was the fastest to cook. So this one really, the moisture escaped a lot quicker with this one, even though I did cook them off at the same time. This one definitely cooked extremely fast, and it is very salty, so I'm gonna stop eating it. But I do like the texture of it a little bit, but I think my favorite would be the addition of milk or the room temperature one. So